Welcome back to the Squadcast. Here's part 2 of our talk on Birdman. I hope you enjoy. So you brought up an interesting point there, if I can just go off of that, in that we don't know really how Mike knows these lines. And he pushes the topic off, just kind of brushes it off real quick before Riggin can kind of question it. And I mean, there is an answer for it, really, in that, you know, he's Leslie's boyfriend and they've read lines together, so, and he's a professional actor, so there's no reason that he wouldn't know the lines. But in this scene, I mean, from up until this point, Riggin has been playing, you know, writer, director, actor, and Mike kind of takes all of those away from him in this scene, definitely taking over the role of directing on the stage and kind of showing Riggin how he should be saying his lines, where he should be on stage, what he should be feeling. And Riggin, of course, is apprehensive at first, but then sees that Mike knows what he's doing, so he starts to go with it. And this is kind of the starting point of the play really coming into its true form, but also kind of falling out of Riggin's hands and into the hands of Mike, the other performers on stage, and eventually the audience that is going to see this show.
Yeah, I definitely think that Mike, at the very least, represents this guy who's coming in, who at first is like the savior because he's this great actor who's going to come in and be that much better than the original Ralph was. And not only is he that much better, he's arguably the best actor on the stage. You know, Riggin is really good. But Mike brings a sort of realism to the stage that you don't see in play acting. And, you know, when he catches Riggin off guard when he starts directing him on stage. So I think that's a really good point to bring up, that Riggin is pretty much feels like he's tenuously in control of this. Like he's got the reins, but it's just this runaway horse that he's just trying to take control of and steer towards some sort of success. And yet then this amazing actor comes in and he's astonished by his ability, but also upstaged at the same time, which is kind of like throwing him off balance. And he realizes that this is a factor that he can't really control. So I think that's a huge issue, is like the aspect of control in his life and how that plays out in the performance of these plays.
Yeah, definitely. So, coming off of this scene, we go back to the guts of the theater. You know, Mike is now part of the play. Riggin okays him. He's apprehensive still because Mike seems a little uncontrollable, and he has this history about him of being a little uncontrollable, just slightly. But
just a little bit.
We go backstage, and, you know, Mike immediately goes into wardrobe to get dressed and whatnot, and in walks Emma Stone's character, Sam, who is Riggin's daughter. And I believe she walks in on Edward Norton, butt-ass naked, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. No, she meets him first on stage. She comes out and talks to Riggin, and it's that interaction I actually really appreciate, because it shows you like how Riggin treats his daughter, at least in front of Mike, and she responds in this way that's basically like, fuck this guy, he treats me like I'm some sort of servant, and, you know, but I'm totally aware of what he just said to me, and we're just gonna keep moving because this is my dad. He's an asshole. So immediately it sets up this kind of conflict, and also the fact that she's certainly differentiated from him enough to let Mike know that she's her own person. And I think part of that is because she sees this guy and he's like, who's this dude? He's kind of interesting, kind of charming, kind of sexy. So she wants to kind of assert herself as her own person, and she does that immediately. And then they walk down to the dressing room, and that's where he just decides to strip naked when she's, I think, standing behind like a rack of clothing or something.
And then in walks his girlfriend, Leslie,
yes.
I believe. Naomi Watts' character. And she sees Sam in the room and is just like, get out.
Yeah, she walks in talking about Sam. Oh, yeah,
she doesn't know she's there.
Because Sam is in the room. Yeah. And then she starts talking, not trash-talking her, but definitely talking about her in a way that's, not, let's say, adoring.
Yeah, definitely.
And then Sam respectfully lets her know that, yo, bitch, I'm right here.
What?
So I like that. I appreciated that a lot. That was there's a little bit of like comedy in this film. Well, actually a lot of comedy throughout this. It's like one of those dark dramedies where there's just like awkward things that happen that are funny, but the entire time you're like, that's really funny, but it's also terrible.
Yeah, a lot of people, a lot of my friends that saw this movie didn't like Emma Stone at all, just because they're not really fans of Emma Stone, but I think she was perfect for this role. She was nominated for an Academy Award for it, and I think she plays a moody teenager quite perfectly, even though she has the voice of a 40-year-old smoker.
Yeah, I wish those people were here to tell us why they think Emma Stone is not fit for this film.
They just don't like Emma Stone. That's the only reason.
Okay, if you don't like Emma Stone, then
get past
all right,
that.
Continue your ad hominem attacks. Like
the character, well, they also had quips that like the character Sam is like, stereotypical dramatic teenager, but we can get into why she's written that way later on. So anyway, we have the introduction of Sam having a thing for Edward Norton and Leslie being pissed off about that. And eventually we get to another love kerfuffle of sorts, where it ends up that Regan has been sleeping with one of the other cast members, Laura, and she's pregnant. And he also has an ex-wife who's in the picture. And we're, I don't really want to talk about Laura's character that much. I mean, she's in the movie. It drives a lot of Regan's stress early on in the movie, but she's not really important to the core story, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm actually hard-pressed to think of any scenes where she is like really a force of a character. I think that initially she's one of those characters that just brings more of like a shitstorm into Regan's life because of the potential pregnancy and the fact she seems to be emotionally unstable by the way they interact at one point. So that it's just something that is more trouble, and it's just you can feel kind of like the stressors piling up in his life as this play is going on.
I think that's her main point in this movie is just unwanted anxiety and stress, and that's really her only purpose in the film. Not to say that the actress isn't great or anything like that, but I just don't think it's very important to the overall discussion that we're going to take away from this movie. So we'll skip ahead a little bit. You know, there's some couple character interactions between Zach Galifianakis' character and Riggin, talking about, oh, are we going to be able to open the play? You know, just unwanted stress and anxiety. They're all building up to basically the opening night of the play. So for anyone that doesn't know, Broadway plays have kind of like a cold opening where they have like investors come in and certain big name people come in to see the play before it's really finished. So there's a great scene. Basically, we come on into the play at the same scene that we saw Riggin, Ralph, and the two female characters, Laura and Leslie, rehearsing in the beginning, which is this dinner scene where mainly what was Ralph's character, now Michael's character, and Riggin are having this conversation about what love is. And the Michael's character is supposed to be drunk in this scene. He's supposed to be drinking fake alcohol, but we find out that he is actually drunk on stage, to which Riggin removes his bottle of gin, and Mike's character starts breaking stuff on stage and basically calls Riggin out by his actual name and tells him like he's a fucker and all of this crazy stuff, and they're forced to close the curtain. And
yeah,
basically Riggin is completely pissed off by this. And, you know, eventually Mike pulls him aside and is like, don't worry about it. This is your first time on Broadway. I've been on here forever. This is just how it works. You know, this is a cold opening. Who gives a shit? Like, none of these people matter. This is for us. And him and Riggin leave the theater and go down to a bar and start talking about Riggin's insecurities about opening the play and how he's worried about what people are going to think about it. To which Mike tells him, you know, it doesn't matter what anyone thinks about this play. All that matters is what this one person thinks about this play. And we have the introduction of the critic.
Enter the critic. So, you've got this, I don't know, kind of meek old woman. Although she is certainly not personality-wise meek. She's
nobody
she's
to fuck with.
But she's a stone cold bitch who is determined to give this play a terrible rating. And I don't remember exactly what he says during that scene to her. But I remember like watching that scene and I was just like, fuck yeah. Like what he says about critics essentially are just I'm trying to find it right now.
I'll let you look that up and talk about the bar scene a little bit more. So basically Michael is explaining to Riggin that the critics, you know, run Broadway. Like, people don't go and see a play unless it is reviewed well by this one person. And she has never, I believe he says that she's never given Michael a bad review. And she's actually really nice to Mike. Like, Mike goes over and talks to her and is basically like, hey, what's up, Lucifer? And she's like, oh, not much, asshole. How's it going? He's like, yeah, I look forward to, you know, fucking your brain up later with my sexy body on stage. And she's like, oh, I look forward to watching that, yada, yada, yada. I hate you too. And Riggin is like, oh, I wish I could do that. So he goes over and, you know, basically tries to do the same thing. And he's like, you know, I love this book by Raymond Carver. What's the title of it again? Raymond Carver.
The title of the book.
When we talk about love. So he's like, yeah, I saw this play performed when I was a kid, and it really, you know, touched me, and it's why I became an actor. And, you know, I wanted to bring this play to Broadway that meant so much to me. And I think he pulls out like the napkin or something that he had gotten signed either by Raymond Carver or by like the main actor
Yeah.
in that play.
It was by Raymond.
Yeah, and he was like, this play really spoke to me on a personal level, and I hope it speaks to you in the same way. And she basically turns to him and is like, I'm going to ruin your play. I don't care if it's good. I don't care if you're a good actor. I don't care if you're a good person. I'm going to give you a bad review because you are everything that I hate about this industry that we live in, the entertainment industry, because Michael Keaton's character is this established franchise actor, basically. Michael Keaton is playing Michael Keaton in this movie, which is kind of fantastic. The title is Birdman, and for any kids out there that don't know, before the Christopher Nolan Batman movies, there were some Tim Burton Batman movies. You know, that guy that made Charlie and the Chocolate Factory? Well, he used to make good movies, and he made some...
Well...
the original Batman movies are dope.
The original Batman movie is good. Batman Returns is better.
I'm not counting the comic book movies from the 90s. Those are awful. Tim Burton did not do those. He did
okay,
Batman
all right.
and Batman Returns, I believe. Batman 2. Those are the only ones he did.
Yeah,
so he did
that's what I mean.
Michael... Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
okay.
So, yeah.
Then we're good. As I couldn't remember. I thought he directed all those movies for some reason.
Only those two. Only the two good ones.
Okay.
So Michael Keaton played Batman back in like the late 80s, early 90s, and became a very well-established actor after that. He also played Beetlejuice in Tim Burton's adaptation, which I didn't know until I heard that. No,
you didn't know that?
I had no idea. I mean, I love Beetlejuice. I've seen Beetlejuice like 100 times. That's a fantastic movie. I would never expect Michael Keaton to be playing Beetlejuice, which...
Yeah, what's also funny is that he's not even in that film a lot. Like, Beetlejuice is not a huge character in that movie, although the film is named after him, but most of this film centers around, like...
Alec Baldwin and his wife.
Yeah. So it's like he's the main character, quote unquote, but really he doesn't.
He just has much.
And a lot of the things that he did in that, he ad-libbed, which I think is amazing.
Michael Keaton is a fantastic actor, but anyway, so basically the critic is like, you're this established Hollywood schmuck that thinks he can come in to Broadway and just put his name on a poster and, get everyone to come and see it. Which, to me, when I first saw this movie, I drew the conclusion to the most recent Hollywood actor and the recent kind of death of Broadway that has come about with bringing movie titles to Broadway, expecting people to just come and see them. Because Broadway, people aren't really seeing shows on Broadway anymore the way they used to. People aren't going to New York the way they used to.
Yeah.
So they brought in, most notably Spider-Man the musical, which was horrible. I think Shrek is on Broadway right now.
Yeah.
But the thing that I took from it was James Franco was recently, I think he's still doing it, of Mice and Men on Broadway. So I drew a parallel between Michael Keaton's character and that story of this person bringing a pretty well-known book to Broadway and, trying to bring popularity from that.
Yeah, no, I think it totally parallels a lot of the things going on in Broadway in real life. And I want to make a specific comment about the conversation with between Mike and Tabitha, the critic. That happens after the first showing.
Yeah, they walk to the bar after Mike, has been drinking on stage for most of the night. Yeah. Right.
And so that conversation goes very, I think, in the side of Mike. Because I found the quote, he basically says, he says, quote, and you don't really know if this is a quote or not unless you know where it's from, but he says, "A man becomes a critic when he cannot be an artist, in the same way that a man becomes an informer when he cannot be a soldier." Flaubert, am I right? And he says who the quote is by. Or Flaubert, if it's French, I have no idea. And so he basically just, like, gives it to her and says, you know what, you think you're hot shit because you're a critic. And really, you're a critic and you can say as many crappy things as you want about this play, but you risk, you know, you're just this person who can rain down, you know, criticism, while I'm the person who's putting myself up on display to be crucified by people like you. And that he draws that allusion to, you know, he's the artist in the same way that in the same way as a soldier puts his life on the line. And, you know, she's a critic in the same way that an informer, you know, points out someone who's, like, committed a crime. So, and I think that totally shuts her up. And she says, don't you ever worry that I'll give you a bad review? And he says, oh, I'm sure you will if I ever give you a bad performance, Mrs. Dickinson. And then she just replies with Mr. Shiner. And then the scene ends. Which I think is completely different than the scene with her and Riggin. And because and it's the same. What's funny is it's the same exact point that they're making, but the conversation goes completely differently because of the way the differences in these two people.
She doesn't respect him the way that she respects Mike.
Certainly, but Mike also responds to her in a way that says, like, he's confident about himself. He's confident that he's going to put on a good show. And he doesn't give a shit what she thinks. Whereas Riggin, her opinion means everything to him. He's not confident that this is going to go well. He has no clue whether this is going to be a success. And he is scared to death that she's going to crush him. And she knows it. So the way she responds to that character of Riggin says a lot, and they function. Riggin and Mike function as foils to one another, and their conversations with this critic expose just how different that these two guys are. And I think that, you know, if we want to get into kind of the symbolism of these two characters later on, I think this scene says a lot about the symbolism of these two characters.
Definitely. So, at this point, you know, Riggin's kind of crushed after talking to the critic, so he heads back to the theater, which is right down the street, and walks in to the basement where he finds his daughter, Sam, hanging out. And obviously it's pretty late at night, so he goes in just kind of to talk to her and whatnot. And they're actually having a pretty real conversation, I would say. Probably one of the first real conversations that they've had so far in the movie, because she's just kind of like, that was a crappy opening. He's like, yeah, you know, it didn't go as expected. And then he jumps back into parent mode and it's like, I smell pot, you know, where's the pot? And he's looking around and she's, you know, being like, no, I wasn't smoking weed, blah, 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 blah. Except Emma Stone voice, so it's more like, oh, I wasn't smoking weed. But he finds the roach, and basically, I think he kills it in front of her. He just lights it up and starts smoking in front of her.
No. What happens is, you know, and I think that this scene, again, is so indicative of, like, you know, they start talking, and he says, hey, I'm not sure if I said thank you. And she's like, for what? And he says, all of it. You've been doing a good job. Which, to me, you know, when he says all of it, I think of just, like, he's trying to say in his, like, really uncomfortable, like, I can't deal with emotions voice, that, like, he wants to say, like, you're a good daughter, like, I love you, and you're a good person, and you've been doing a good job with your life, and I've been ... And she, you know, she says, yeah. And he's like, so I just wanted to say that. And I think that he wanted to say that he's been a crappy father, or something along those lines. And then all of a sudden, he stops abruptly, and he's like, "What's that smell?" And it's like he lets that smell completely derail this conversation that he's trying to be real with her, and at the same time he's so uncomfortable that like he'll take anything he can to try and latch onto, and he just falls back into the same old mistakes of being hypercritical about some weed, when really he could have gone in this direction where they like could have connected and he could have made something meaningful out of it. So I really see that as like, this is an opportunity for you to see how his character makes mistakes and how he's flawed.
But it does,
and how it destroys the relationship, because it totally turns something meaningful into something that just crushes Sam.
It does end on a good note, though, I believe, because he smokes pot in front of her, I believe.
No, she leaves.
Yeah, and then he smokes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Can we not do this?" Like when he's looking for the weed, and he finds it, and he's like, "You can't do this to me," and she's like, "To you?" And you know, it brings it back to like how she thinks that everything is about him, and you know that this somehow she has like besmirched him by smoking weed, and then he's so like upset after she leaves that he lights up this joint.
Forced to smoke marijuana. How?
Reefer madness, reefer madness.
Yeah. So that's the introduction of basically his actual relationship with his daughter, which up until this point it's been a work relationship. She's been his assistant, and now we see that their actual relationship.
And one other thing is that like before she walks out, you know, she says like, "What do you mean it's important to you?" along those lines, and he's like, "It is important to me, like I've been trying to make something out of myself by doing this." And then she comes back, you know, he says like, "I want to do something that actually means something to me." And she's like, "Means something to who? Like you had a career when you were doing the you know, Birdman, and you think that you're making yourself into someone, and that you're trying to be important, but you're not. You hate people, you hate bloggers, you make fun of Twitter, and you don't even have a Facebook page." And she's saying, like, you're the one who's scared to death, and you're scared to death that you don't matter. And she's like, "You know what? You're right. It's not important. You're not important.
Yeah.
Get used to it."
That's a great... I remember seeing that scene and applauding a little bit in my head at Emma Stone's existential angst, which is quite commendable throughout the entire movie.
Yeah, so as much as immature as she is at surface level, that scene is like, again, another foil to Riggin, and it shows that as important as he wants to seem, he wants everyone else around him, he wants the audience, he wants the world to see him as this important figure, and not just a blockbuster hit, you know, without any self-respect. And because he wants that so badly, he's willing to sabotage his personal relationships inadvertently.
It's a stereotypical yuppie parent. Stereotypical yuppie daughter.
Yeah. And it also speaks to like the issue of substance use, where, you know, he feels so devastated by what she said to him, and I think on some level he knows it's true, that it drives him to then smoke weed himself as a way to like escape. To then escape to escape that uncomfortable feeling. You know, anything to get out of that, to avoid that experience. And that's, you know, throughout the film, it's funny because Sam is this person who is in rehab and is trying to get off drugs, and it's kind of like a statement about why people turn to substances.
Yeah, definitely. So, we'll skip ahead a little bit, which I believe the movie does as well. I believe with him smoking weed, it pans out onto the street and passing day to the next morning. But we'll skip ahead to the second opening night, the second cold opening for people. And at this point, they make it pretty much to the end of the show, which ends with Regan's character busting open the door to find his girlfriend, Naomi Watts' character, in bed with Edward Norton. And, you know, he comes in with a gun and he's like, you know, why are you sleeping with him? Yada, 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 questioning what love is, you know, what it means to be a person. And basically ends up shooting himself on stage. And they're like, oh, you know, that went pretty well. We made it all the way to the end this time. And most notably, though, Michael pulls Regan aside and is like, what is up with that prop gun? You know, that gun doesn't make me scared. You need a gun that looks real. I need to be scared on stage. I forgot, though, when Edward Norton rolls out of the sheets. Is it this scene where Edward Norton rolls out of the sheets and just has a boner on stage?
I forget.
I'm pretty sure it's in the second opening night that happens.
Yeah, it is.
It's so great.
Yeah, and the gun being fake is like another. It's the same thing with, you know, Mike wanting to have actual gin on stage when he's drunk. You know, he's all about realism on stage, and he wants them to have like a real gun, and he's like, you know,
well, not necessarily a real gun, but a gun that looks real. You know.
Yeah, he says like, get a better one.
So at this point, they made it pretty much all the way through the show. And things are looking better at this point in the play. But Regan is still very apprehensive of how the show is going to go. And there's a bunch of drama going on with Emma Stone's character and Michael and Leslie, and ends up that Laura isn't pregnant and she was deceiving Regan's character, not purposefully, but still, you know, unwanted drama that he didn't need. So he distances himself from her. And at this point, unless there's anything you want to talk about, any scenes, I'm going to skip ahead to the final opening night. Oh, you know what? Let's talk about the scene where Regan locks himself out of the theater on the last cold opening. So
I love that scene.
The last rehearsal night before they're about to open, during one of the scene transitions, you know, Regan's really stressed out, so he jumps outside the back door for a quick smoke in an alleyway, and he ends up locking himself outside with the bathrobe that he's wearing caught in the door. And he can't get the bathrobe out, and he's, you know, stuck outside. There's no way that he's going to get back in. He's going to miss his cue. So he decides that he's going to walk all the way around the alley, down 2 streets into the theater, and past the audience onto the stage. And that is probably one of the best scenes in the movie. Just Regan speed walking. He doesn't want to run because he doesn't want to be noticed by anyone. So just walking as quickly as possible without trying to be noticed in tighty whities and black socks through Times Square on probably like a busy Friday night. Then he gets to the theater, and the ushers don't even want to let him in because they don't recognize him. They don't know who he is. And he like pushes past them and, you know, makes it out into the crowd. And he makes it out there pretty much on his cue where he's supposed to be busting in to catch Naomi Watts and Edward Norton in bed. And he yells out from the audience, like, "Hey, what are you doing with my wife? You know, what are you doing with my girlfriend?" And Naomi Watts looks out into the audience, and she doesn't miss a beat. She doesn't question it. She just starts feeding him lines of where they are, like, in the dialogue, because he's so flustered that he, like, can't really remember what he's supposed to say. And he jumps up onto the stage, and he's supposed to have a gun at this point, but he doesn't, so he's just pointing his finger at Edward Norton and Naomi Watts. And eventually, I think somebody hands him the prop gun.
Yeah.
And they finish the play. And, Edward Norton pulls him aside and is like, "That was one of the most genuine takes that we had so far. Like, that was pretty much the best night that we've had." Which is hilarious, because everything went wrong. And that is when he was most genuine and an actual actor on stage.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because he comes into the audience and people are laughing because he's in his tighty whities yet again. And he's pointing this imaginary gun at the stage, and people are giggling, and he points at them and says, "Shut up! Fuck you! Shut up!" So, which is just great, because he's like, you're in the middle of the audience, in character, playing your character, responding to the audience as if, people were laughing at him, and yet he's still delivering his lines, and it's almost... It's so symbolic, because it's him stuck out in the audience, and it's him responding to their criticism, their laughter of him, and being stuck halfway between in character on stage and actually responding to the people saying things that he probably wishes he could say in real life that he actually does get to say. So it's like this great midpoint for him in between reality and the stage, his life on stage. So I just love the whole aspect of that. And again, there's like some serious symbolism of the scene if we want to get into that later on. But I think that's just like the epitome of shit hitting the fan, and yet him triumphing.
Yeah. So from there, we go to the actual opening night. And the critic's going to be in the theater. His ex-wife is going to be there. Everyone's going to be there. And, the play's going well. And during his break from the stage, he goes up to his dressing room, where he runs into his ex-wife. And basically they have a conversation, a pretty genuine conversation. It seems like they're friendly with each other, until she brings up, I think, like, "Why haven't you signed the divorce papers yet?" or something along those lines. And the fact that he mortgaged their, like, summer home to pay for this play, and just a bunch of doubts as to what his intentions are. What is he trying to prove?
Yeah. And this is the scene where he's talking to his ex-wife. Yeah. You're talking about? Yeah, and they talk. I remember a specific thing that they discuss. He says out of the blue. Do you remember that night where we were at that party? And she's like, "The night you fucked so-and-so?" Like, he had sex with somebody else. And she's like, "Why would you bring that up?" And, he brings it up, and he's like, "Yeah, that night he walked, after that all happened, he says like that he walked out to the beach and he walks into the ocean and tries to kill himself. But there's these jellyfish in the ocean. He doesn't realize that he's surrounded by jellyfish and he's trying to kill himself, and yet these jellyfish are shocking him, and they kind of, they save him, is what he's saying. Essentially he would have killed himself if these things weren't all over him, shocking him, forcing him into like survival mode even more so. And then he basically, fails to kill himself, and she's like shocked by this.
Yeah, she's pretty much like.
But also.
This,
Yeah. And she's like, you said it was the burn in reaction to the jellyfish. She's like, you said it was a sunburn. And he's like, yeah, and you believed me. And his ex-wife Sylvia, she's like, to be honest, I didn't give a shit. And he says, I love you, and I love Sam. She's like, I know, and they just stare at each other. And they talk more about their life, and but at the same time, the fact that she says like, to be honest, I didn't give a shit. Like, she was clearly already over it, and like the relationship, and it kind of says a lot about like, she's referring to one thing, but I also think that when she says like, I didn't give a shit, it's also like, look, I don't know why you're telling me this, but I can't be that person that like loves you anymore, and I know that this is emotional between us, but like, we're done.
Yeah.
And that to me says a lot about their relationship and him still kind of clinging to it. And at the end of the scene, she kisses him. And then, someone comes on over the speakers and is like, places for Act 2, places. And then they have to go. So it's, that scene, so much symbolism.
Yeah,
oh gosh.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
So, places for
but yeah.
Act 2.